Wyndham Clark won the US Open. He held the trophy. He was supposed to come back and defend it. He never got that chance. And the reason why is one of the most uncomfortable decisions golf's establishment has ever had to make. Because this wasn't about his swing. It wasn't about his ranking. What happened between Clark and the USGA goes deeper than anything you'd expect from a defending major champion. And when you hear what actually went down and what a senior USGA official said out loud about Clark's future in the sport, you'll understand exactly why this story spread through the golf world faster than anything this season. Most people heard a version of it. Very few know the full picture, the official letter, the conditions attached, and what's quietly sitting on the horizon in 2033 that makes this whole situation even more brutal. Personally, I think the USGA handled this about as well as they could, but I want to know where you stand. Drop your opinion in the comments. And if you follow the tour closely and want real conversations about what's actually happening, subscribe. We're just getting started. Now, here's what really happened. Clark didn't arrive at the 2023 US Open as a favorite. He wasn't the name anyone had circled. Rory McIlroy was the story that week, chasing a major that had slipped through his hands too many times to count. The crowd was behind Rory. The narrative was built for Rory. Clark had other ideas. Wire to wire, one shot clear of McIlroy at the finish. The 2023 US Open belonged to Wyndham Clark, a player who had spent years grinding on tour without a moment anyone would remember. That win changed everything. World ranking jumped to number 3. Ryder Cup selection followed. His name was suddenly in conversations reserved for the elite. But here's what made that moment dangerous for what came next. Clark didn't just win a title, he won an identity. And when that identity started cracking, when the ranking slid from 3 to 28, when the Ryder Cup spot disappeared, when tournaments stopped going his way, something underneath began breaking with it. The frustration didn't stay private for long. Weeks before Oakmont, at Quail Hollow during the PGA Championship, Clark launched his driver after a poor tee shot. The club hit a sponsor board. A wind flag attendant was standing just feet away. Tour officials noticed. The golf world noticed. And then everyone moved on, assuming it was one bad moment from a player under pressure. Nobody realized it was a warning. What happened next at Oakmont didn't just embarrass Clark, it put his entire future in the sport in question. Oakmont Country Club carries weight that most venues simply don't. This is one of the most respected pieces of golf real estate in the world, a course that has hosted more US Opens than almost anywhere else, a place where the history lives in the walls, the lockers, the very ground beneath your feet. Arriving there as the defending US Open champion should have been Clark's moment of return, a homecoming of sorts. Instead, his 2025 campaign was already unraveling before he even teed it up. The ranking had dropped. The Ryder Cup place was gone. Expectations had shifted from champion to question mark. And when he missed the cut at Oakmont, unable to make the weekend at the very tournament built around his 2023 legacy, something inside him snapped. What followed wasn't a quiet moment of frustration behind closed doors. A photo started circulating. The damage to Oakmont's locker room was visible, real, and bad enough that club officials couldn't ignore it. This wasn't a dent or a scuff. The image spread across golf social media within hours. Members were asking questions. Staff had seen it, and the club's leadership understood immediately that this required a formal response. Within days, Oakmont's president, John Lynch, sent a letter to every single member of the club. That letter contained 4 words about Wyndham Clark that no major champion had ever had written about them before. The letter was direct, no softening, no diplomatic language. It stated that following multiple discussions with the USGA and the Oakmont board, a decision had been made. Wyndham Clark would no longer be permitted on club property, not suspended temporarily, not warned, banned. The letter made clear this would remain in effect unless the board formally reconsidered. For a moment, let that land. The defending US Open champion, banned from a US Open venue, not by a random club, by the very grounds where the USGA conducts one of golf's 4 major championships. The same organization that hands out the trophy Clark already had at home was now involved in keeping him off the premises. But the ban itself wasn't even the most shocking part. Getting back in required Clark to meet a specific set of conditions: full payment for all damages caused, a meaningful financial contribution to a charity chosen by the Oakmont board, and, perhaps most revealing of what officials truly believed about this situation, the successful completion of counseling and anger management sessions. These weren't suggestions, they were requirements. The club was sending a message that this wasn't a one-time mistake they were willing to quietly absorb. Clark responded publicly. He called it a mistake made in a moment of rage. He said it was a wake-up call. He acknowledged that every piece of negative attention that followed was self-induced and deserved. For a player who had rarely shown that kind of honesty, it was significant. But the damage, literally and reputationally, was already done. Here's where it stopped being a club dispute and became something the entire golf world couldn't look away from. A senior USGA official, after learning the full details of what Clark had done inside one of the sport's most historic clubhouses, said something that crossed a line most officials never cross publicly. The quote, confirmed and reported, was this: "I'd ban him from next year's Open. Not a formal decision, not an official ruling, but a statement made by someone with direct influence over who competes at the US Open." The weight of those words hit the golf community immediately, because if that sentiment gained traction inside the USGA, Wyndham Clark, the reigning champion, could have been excluded from the very tournament he won. That had never happened before, not like this, and quietly, behind all of it, sits a detail that almost nobody has connected yet, one that makes the 2033 US Open the most significant date in this entire story. Oakmont hosts the US Open again in 2033. By that point, Clark's automatic exemptions as a 2023 champion will have expired. If the ban against him remains in place and is never formally lifted by the board, he could be barred from competing at Oakmont entirely, returning to the exact venue where his title should have been celebrated, locked out instead. Most people missed that detail. When you see what happened next, you'll understand why it matters even more. What nobody predicted, not the officials who wrote the letter, not the fans who shared the photo, not the USGA figure who floated the ban, was what Clark would do at the 2026 US Open at Shinnecock Hills. He showed up. He didn't just show up, he led from the first round, wire to wire, again. The same ruthless front-running that defined his 2023 win reappeared as if the previous 2 years hadn't happened. Through 4 rounds at Shinnecock, Clark held his position while the course tried to take him apart. The crowd wasn't with him. Fans were openly cheering for his ball to find the rough, find the water, find anything but the fairway. On the 17th hole in the final round, a rules situation involving a camera stand drew fierce public criticism toward Clark and the USGA simultaneously. Spectators became so hostile that officials ejected multiple fans from the venue. Clark finished at 4 under par, 1 shot clear of Sam Burns. His second US Open title, claimed in front of a crowd that wanted him to fail, at a tournament where powerful voices had suggested he shouldn't be allowed to compete. He became only the 9th player in US Open history to win wire-to-wire, and the 24th multiple US Open champion, the man that Oakmont banned, the player a USGA official wanted excluded, the champion the golf world had spent 2 years writing complicated headlines about, walked off Shinnecock Hills holding the trophy again. Now I want to hear from you. Should the USGA have drawn a harder line and kept Clark out of the US Open entirely? Or did letting him compete and watching him win prove that the sport made the right call? Drop your answer in the comments. This debate isn't settled, and if this kind of coverage is what you're looking for, real stories, real context, no filler, subscribe to the channel. Every week we break down what's actually happening on tour, the way fans who actually watch it deserve to hear it. We'll see you in the next one.